Oh, hello, I didn't see you there. What am I doing? I'm just walking out in the outdoors, just taking in the beauty life has to offer. It's just, it's just a relaxing, good old walk in the outdoors and off technology. And I will admit, I should do this more often because it's really refreshing. Like, you know what I mean? And what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, you probably read the title of the video already, and as you probably guessed, we're gonna go back in time 40 years. Go back in time by 40 years, and we're gonna look at some trains, 15 of them, from Conrail. What's Conrail, you ask? Conrail was a Class 1 railroad of the United States of America. More specifically, the primary Class 1 railroad of the northeastern part of the United States. They were really cool. They had some really cool trains too, and cool looking paint, and just a cool name. Everything about Conrail is cool. Cool Conrail, you get it? Cool Conrail, because they are cool, but whatever, you get the idea. But seriously, Conrail was a force to be reckoned with. It's very unique. Like I said, I had a unique paint. And everything about Conrail was really good. But then in the late 1990s, up until the end of the 1990s decade, Conrail got split up into two by CSX and Norfolk Southern. Throughout the 2000s, there were a decent lot of locomotives painted Conrail blue. Well, yeah, with Norfolk Southern got 58% of Conrail, but CSX got 42%. But there was still a lot of Conrail engines out there, even if they're not running under the Conrail name anymore. But once the 2000s came to an end, the 2010s began, that number slowly started to decrease. Actually, no, that picked up in the 2010s because they were either being repainted to CSX and Norfolk Southern colors, or just retired as a whole, or both. But anyway, what does it mean? I don't know, but you get the idea. They're slowly starting to diminish throughout the 2010s. In 2014, the last year to have Conrail paint, Norfolk Southern 8312, which was a C40-8 locomotive, I think. I might have to fact check that. But that was the last locomotive to have Conrail paint. But then that got retired, which actually sucks, because, like I said, Conrail was really cool. But their legacy still lives on in both railroads. In fact, each one of them has one Conrail heritage unit, with Norfolk Southern having Norfolk Southern 8098, and the CSX having CSX 1976. 1976 symbolizing the year Conrail began service, or to be more precise, freight service. Alright, I'm going to stop the babbling, and we are going to travel back in time to the 1980s, Conrail's golden age, and we are going to have a look at cool old Conrail.
The year is 1981. This should mark the beginning of Conrail's golden age. The reason why I say that is because in this exact year, Conrail began to turn a profit, which would later skyrocket throughout the next couple years. Anyway, here we are on the Conrail Reading line, which would be owned by Norfolk Southern after the split in '99. Conrail 6406, an ST40-2 locomotive, charges through two crossings with a 119-car manifest in time. Man, you gotta love that Leslie RS3L train horn. That's one of my favorite things about Conrail. That horn is never gonna get old. So iconic in my opinion. Fun fact, Conrail used this horn on most of its locomotives throughout its lifetime. Hell, even a handful of locomotives after the Conrail split occurred in '99 still have this train horn. But most of the locomotives that have it are mostly on Norfolk Southern. Like I said, it's a handful. I'm not sure if CSX had Leslie RS3L horns on their ex-Conrail locomotives. I can only assume yes, but either way, it's still very cool to listen to. I love that horn.
Here we are again on Conrail's Reading line, where we will see a 100-car coal train trundle past at a moderate speed of 50 miles per hour. The long, heavy train is heading from the county coal mine in Sanctum, Pennsylvania, to a port in Cleveland, Ohio, where the coal will be transferred onto a bulk carrier for shipment across the Great Lakes to Canada via the St. Clair River. The train weighs at over 10,000 tons, which is so heavy that it requires two sets of three locomotives positioned in the middle and at the rear of the train to act as distributed power. The train is being led by a Conrail 6773, an SD50 locomotive.
Detector mild boost 0.0.
In 1983, we traveled 900 miles west from Pennsylvania to Missouri to catch a hotshot trail van train heading from Kearney, New Jersey to St. Louis, Missouri. Conrail 8276, a GP38-2 locomotive, gives us a horn salute as it rumbles over the points nearing 60 miles per hour.
A Conrail local, led by the SD40-2 High Hood number 607 and former Penn Central GP30 number 2206, stops at a train station to reverse into a grain elevator to pick up 5 hopper cars. As the local prepares to reverse, a Hotshock Autorack combined trail van train being led by SD50 number 6738 plows past the local at speeds nearing 60 miles an hour. While coupled to the grain cars, 607 gives two blasts of its Nathan P3 train horn and continues its journey as a duo of SD40-2s, which are trailing behind the combined auto rack trail van, consist as helpers fly past.
Here we are on Conrail's Detroit line, which would later be passed down to Norfolk Southern after it, and CSX split up Conrail in 1999. A long-distance mail train roars over the interlocking at 60 miles per hour. However, 6576 Leslie RS3L train horn is fouled due to a build-up of snow in its diaphragm.
In the early hours of the day, we ventured to Conrail's Chicago line, which later be passed on to Norfolk Southern after the split. Anyway, this sighting will feature not one, but two trains charging out of the snow at over 60 miles per hour. The first train we'll see is plunged out of the snow at speed in Amtrak train number 49, westbound Lake Shore Limited. The train has been led by three F40PH locomotives, number 203, 216, and 204. The second train to force its way through the snow at speed is a westbound Conrail grain train, being led by C3078 number 6576. Thanks to a super powerful air compressor, the buildup of snow in the diaphragm of 6576's Leslie RS3L train horn had been blasted out due to compressed air. Now the horn can give out that signature Conrail tune as this grain train accelerates from 40 miles per hour to speeds exceeding 60 miles per hour. Don't believe me? Then let the train do the talking.
It's the start of a new decade, an eastbound Conrail intermodal train, loaded with mail and many different types of goods, storms out of the heavy snowstorm at speeds that would make a motorcyclist blush.
During the Christmas holidays of 1991, we once again visited Conrail's Chicago line to witness another train meet. This catch will feature Amtrak train number 48, the eastbound Lakeshore Limited, and a monster tanker train. 3 F-40s are on the plan for the sprint to New York City as the train accelerates out of the Chicago area. As the tail of the lakeshore passes us, C48W number 6090, which is sporting the new Conrail quality paint scheme, leads the monster out of snow.
During a nighttime snowstorm, a triangle of headlights cut through the dense blizzard like a samurai sword. An overnight manifest train rounds the curve at high speed coming out of Boston, Massachusetts. Its destination, Altoona, Pennsylvania. A newly built SD70 is on the point as it dashes through the snow like a one-horse open sleigh.
A recently repainted SD50 leads a combined manifest intermodal train through a dense snowfall, picking up speed as it hurdles over the interlocking.
Somewhere on the Reading line, Conrail SW 1500 number 9505 with slug unit number 1007 in tow, drags a local freight uphill and stops near a small oil storage facility to drop off some tankers. As the locals begin to reverse, C40-AW number 6780 is on the point of astonishing 9-engine power move. Behind them, a long heavy manifest train. Watch in awe as the big heavy 9-engine manifest rounds the curve at true Conrail speed.
Detector milepost 0.0. No defects. Total axles 7, 2, 4. Train speed 6.
a mark. Now we all know why SW1500s are the most seen switching cars in yards. At least the slug unit gave it a bit extra power, but seriously, the repair bill for that bumper is going to be horrendous. There goes the local.
4. Train speed. 5.
The year is 1995. Here we will see two manifest trains meet up at this crossing. The first manifest to go by is headed east, being led by SD38 number 6925. Rolling out a storm from the other direction is the second manifest train, heading west. The train is being led by a newly built SD80 Mac number 4113. Watch in admiration as the Conrail Cadillac travels past at 50 miles per hour. I know what you're thinking. What is a Conrail Cadillac, and why did you call it 4113 that? Well, it's because the word Cadillac means something that stands out among its kind, whether it's their quality, luxury, size, or all of the above. The SD80 Max, for instance, are huge compared to the standard diesel locomotive, the SD40-2, making them the biggest Conrail fleet. Therefore, the reason why the SD80 Max are called Conrail Cadillacs is due to their immense size.
On Conrail's Detroit line, there's a CSX line called the CSX Detroit Subdivision, meaning that before the 1999 split, CSX on Conrail trains would have shared tracks in the Detroit area. Here is one of these trains, a CXX local being led by SD42 number 8376, which is seen as a CSX YN2 livery. Here it stops near a small auto rack loading yard to pick up loaded auto racks. After adding the auto racks to its consist 8376, tracks on for a bit before coming to a stop at a red signal. Roaring out of the snow at full speed is a hot shot Conrail double stack train being led by SD60 number 6842. Once the hotshot had passed, 8376 dragged the train onto the Detroit line to finish the last remaining miles of its journey.
Back on the Reading line, a Conrail local, being led by two GP38-2s, is seen reversing into the oil storage facility to drop off some oil tankers. The tankers have been uncoupled from the local already, but it can't leave yet because of a 100-car auto-rack train that is due to pass the oil storage facility at high speed. SD45 number 6087 leads the auto-rack train uphill and past the local at speeds ranging between 60 and 70 miles per hour. Once the auto-rack train had disappeared into the snow, the Conrail local exited the facility to continue its journey.
$1999 was a sad year for Conrail because of the impending CSX and Norfolk Southern split that would occur on June 1st of that year. Conrail 6074 is on the point of a long manifest train bound for Fort Wayne, Indiana. Join me as we watch this manifest train floor it uphill at speeds above 50 miles per hour with one hell of a lash up on the point, making this occurrence Conrail's last winter highball. Although what came of Conrail was heartbreaking, at least we can look back with a smile and say that Conrail not only fulfilled its duty, but had one hell of a run while doing so.
Oh, hi. You're back. So, did you enjoy that little show? Good. I'm glad. Now, you're probably wondering where I'm at. Well, I'm at the Central Lakes Park. It's pretty close to where I live, so I just walked here. It's really cool and peaceful. And the lake itself is just right in front of me. Let me show you. So you've got the bridge, so you can like get from one side of the park to the other, so that you don't have to swim in the water. There's some shrubs and trees. I think they're called shrubs. We'll just call them bushes. I don't think shrubs is the right term for them, but anyway, it's really cool. You can see the sunlight reflecting off the water. You can sort of see it. Bit of mountains at the back. Pretty cool, eh? I like coming here every once in a while. It just, makes you forget life. Yeah, because like when you go in the outdoors, it's very peaceful. It just allows yourself to just relax and let go of all the crap you have to put up with in life. Now, I'm sure you all have some questions about Conrail. Why was it created? Like, what was the split we keep bringing up? And what impact did it have on America? Well, Conrail's story is quite eventful. Well, in a good way, sort of eventful, because, yeah, it started off, it was struggled a bit, but then later on got its footing. That's just putting it lightly. Quite a bit has happened to not only make Conrail exist, but it just brought it throughout its whole 20 plus years of being a thing, until it just was no more. Not that it went bankrupt or anything, but this split we keep bringing up, yeah, that was kind of the reason. But we didn't really go into much depth, but now that we've seen all the trains, now we can go into more depth. Alright. So, Conrail's story begins in the early 1970s. So, we're going to take a trip back in time, and we're going to explore the seeds that were planted to create one of the most iconic and greatest railroads in American history. In the early 1970s, US railroads were not doing very well, like at all. This was because of the automobile industry, which was taking a rapid rise in popularity. Because you see, unlike with trains that are just stuck on their rails, automobiles can go wherever the hell you want them to go. Like if you want to go on the road to the shopping center to get some groceries, you can. If you want to go on an off-roading adventure, you can. There are like specially modified cars called 4x4s that can do just that. But don't take them to the ocean though, because they will not do well. Like the engine will stall because of the water that accumulates in the engine, which can disrupt some moving parts, and it will just sink to the bottom of the ocean floor. So do not try that. But overall, automobiles were very efficient when it came to versatility, because they can go where the hell you want. Trains, they're just stuck on their rails, so the only direction they can go is forwards and backwards because they're on their rails, so they can't really do much. With automobiles, they can go forwards, backwards, and even sideways. Hell, you can even do a Tokyo drift if you're that experienced. Now, going back to the railroads, this was taking a massive toll on them. And I don't mean the good kind of toll. Oh no. They're losing profits left and right. Their passenger services were struggling. Let's take, for example, the Super Chief from the Santa Fe, and some of the Southern Pacific's daylight service. Basically, all the top-tier passenger trains that were once so popular during the 40s and 50s have taken a massive dwindle of popularity. Went the downfall from high all the way to low. Down the toilet faster than freaking, I don't know, someone doing a dump when they have diarrhea. Okay, not the best comparison, but seriously, this was very bad for the railroads. But we're focusing on the freight industry here. And while Amtrak was created by Congress through the Rail Passenger Services Act of 1970 and incorporated in the District of Columbia in 1971, and was proven to be a success, this left the freight railroads still struggling. Going back to Amtrak, the success was very, very little. They were also struggling with their startup as well. However, for the freight railroads that used to run the passenger trains, this gave them less of a stress to worry about. And another thing that was causing the freight railroads to lose money was an invention that became a thing, with the first model being invented in 1896, and throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and that time especially, was when they were really starting to gain popularity due to their versatility and power, and basically were simple yet very effective when it came to transporting goods from manufacturer to consumer, as they were limitless on where they could go, unlike with trains. Trucks. More specifically, semi-trucks. With the first ever truck being created in 1896 by Gottlieb Daimler and Wilhelm Maybach, and the first semi-truck being created in 1898 by Alexander Winton, these heavy vehicles have come a long way since the early days, much like trains. But unlike trains, trucks can go wherever the hell they want, because trains are stuck on only their rails, you see, but trucks, on the other hand, they can go anywhere you want, on-road, off-road, except the ocean, because they'll end up sinking like the Titanic in 1912 if you have them submerged in water, and if they're heavy enough. Speaking of heavy, semi-trucks, they can carry a lot of cargo. In fact, the average semi-trailer can hold between 45,000 and 53,000 pounds of cargo, which is a lot if you ask me. However, what these vehicles lack compared to trains is how much they can really carry, because 45,000, 53,000 pounds, that's really like not a lot compared to what trains carry. And because of the fact you only hold so much in one trailer, yeah, these weren't, very effective. However, they were very effective. No, they still are today. But especially during the 50s, 60s, and 70s when trains were starting to take a downfall, trucks, they were very effective. Because as stated before, they can carry a lot, can go wherever the hell you want, except the ocean. Yeah, you've got chips for that, buddy. Just try not to sink them. Failure! But basically, they were very, very, very good. Now, going back to that trailer problem, you can only carry so much in one trailer. However, down here in Australia, we've come up with a really good solution. We call these vehicles road trains. Road trains, they're basically trucks that can hold 2 or more trailers. Like, it's very crazy what they can haul. But yeah, like I said, you can only carry so much in one trailer, but down here in Australia, we've got road trains, having a very effective solution in rural areas where trains can't, go out because there are no tracks that go there. That's why trucks are very effective when it comes to manufacturer to consumer shipping, because they can go to places where trains can't, because they're not limited by their rails. They can go on road and off-road. They're very effective. And America, they sort of do the same thing, except they can't do as much as Australia can, because there are certain laws in different states that kind of stop trucks from having more than like 2 trailers. Some states they allow 3 trailers, but other than that, yeah, you couldn't really do much. Okay, that's enough about trucks. Now let's get back to trains. Now, there was a railroad that was created to solve this problem, which was a merger between the New York Central and the Pennsylvania Railroad. This railroad was called Penn Central, which was created in 1968, and it acquired the quickly going bankrupt New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad Company in 1969. Now, many of you might be wondering and asking this question: did Penn Central do a good job at helping to keep America's rail economy afloat? Well, the answer is no.
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 No! 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 No!
Oh, hell no!
Nah! Nah, bro. Nah. No! 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 Yeah, no. Penn Central didn't do a good job at all. In fact, it did the exact opposite of helping, because, man, they were losing a lot of money. And I mean, a lot of money. Now, why was this railroad that was created to help with the American rail industry lose so much money, you ask? Well, there are a lot of problems in that railroad company. And yeah, I'm gonna go through its speed run style. So try yourself.
Friction among workers, board members disagree on everything that dealt with improving the railroad to help with the improvement of the American rail economy, dog-water maintenance of rail equipment, incompatible with technology that result in trains ending up places. Rapidly declining industries in the Midwestern region, unneeded rail lines that led to further decline of profits, the acquirement of the New York, New Haven, and Hartford Rail that didn't help Penn Central at all, a rapid rise in operating costs, potatoes rotting in Penn Central's Circle Yard in Selkirk, New York, that led to main shipments transporting the potatoes on trucks with further damage to the already profitless company, and above all else, train wrecks. Yeah, ouch. Normally train wrecks are rare, but in the case of Penn Central, they were a pretty common occurrence. Why? This was because of Penn Central's dirt poor maintenance record. Here's one accident that, I kid you not, had a train jump the tracks and decided to go on the bloody highway in Boston, Massachusetts. On the goddamn highway. That's right, Penn Central's maintenance record was so horrendous that it had trains going off the tracks and onto roads and backing up traffic. Now, you're probably wondering, what happened here? How did it happen? And when did it happen? Well, I've wasted enough time explaining the problems of Penn Central already, so I'm just going to summarize this real quick. So basically, on January of 1969, a Penn Central freight train was rolling down the tracks and then bang, jumped the tracks and just rolled onto the Boston Highway and caused a whole traffic jam. And as you can see, there are a bunch of people, which I can only assume are either just, just thinking, how the hell does a train jump the tracks and end up on the road, or actively trying to clean up the mess. But what did happen? Well, as you can probably guess, poor management of infrastructure. In short, poor management of train tracks, which caused the train to just derail and onto the highway. So, yeah, that's basically it. So, what did this mean for Penn Central? Well, not only did this mean a hell of a lot more money was being lost for the railroad, but it also meant that after 1969, the situation had become very dire. Banks had stopped giving loans, and the railroad was losing over $100 million in the first quarter of 1970, and it was not looking good for Penn Central at all. So it was a no-brainer that on June 21st, 1970, Penn Central declared bankruptcy, which, like I said, was a no-brainer considering how horrendous the company managed themselves. Now it's time to fast forward to the mid-1970s. On January 2nd, 1974, American President Richard Nixon signed the Regional Rail Reorganization Act of 1973, also known as the 3R Act, which would help to provide temporary funding to bankrupt railroads such as the Penn Central and the following 6 railroads: the Ann Arbor Railroad, the Erie-Lackawanna Railway, the Lehigh Valley Railroad, the Reading Company, the Central Railroad of New Jersey, and the Lehigh and Hudson River Railway. These 7 railroads helped to form the Consolidated Rail Corporation, or Conrail for short. On November 9th, 1975, Congress approved the final plan of the formation of Conrail, which was to incorporate a small handful of commuter lines that ran throughout the northeastern U.S. Finally, on April 1st, 1976, Conrail began freight operations.
Did Conrail have a smooth startup?
Not really.
During its early years, Conrail was struggling to turn a profit. This is mainly because of shippers believing that trucks are the best way to transport cargo from A to B, which they were pretty good at. But keep in mind you can only carry so much in a trailer, whereas trains, they can carry like so much more. And they help to keep hundreds of semi-trucks off the road. Though, the shippers back in Conrail's early days, they didn't know that yet. So as Conrail struggled on, they were slowly starting to patch things up. I mean, they were doing a much better job than Penn Central. And even though Conrail wasn't gaining a lot of money, they were like doing so much more than what Penn Central did during its existence. Another thing to take note of is that Conrail lasted way longer than its predecessor. Though, I'll get to that in a minute. After 5 years of struggling, Conrail was finally turning a profit by the time 1981 rolled around. And from that year onwards, Conrail's profits began to skyrocket. I know what you're thinking. What was Conrail doing that Penn Central was struggling to do? Well, a lot of things. Like for example, maintenance. They were doing a much better job at maintenance than Penn Central. Thus, derailments were very rare on Conrail. In fact, Conrail only had like a small handful of derailments throughout its existence. Here's one of Conrail's derailments that I'll display on the screen. Now, I know what you're thinking. When did this happen? And what happened? Well, this derailment happened in Millbury, Ohio on the 11th of November 1983. An eastbound mail train collided into the back of a westbound freight train. And the cause of this was because the mail train had missed a signal indication, which caused the accident. But other than that, Conrail's safety record was pretty clean, and its maintenance record much cleaner than Penn Central's. Of course, it was a bit spotty, but it was much cleaner than Penn Central's. Another thing that Conrail did better than Penn Central was looking at the lines that they had, which was a lot. Unlike Penn Central, which kept the lines they didn't need, which was another reason why Penn Central was losing a lot of money due to profitless lines, Conrail got rid of the profitless lines. The lines that weren't earning them money, they were gone. And the lines that were making them money, they kept them obviously. And this shrank their network by a lot, which was good because they can now focus on earning more money instead of losing money to the lines that they didn't need. This was the reason why Conrail was able to gain a profit in 81, one of the main reasons, and their profits were able to skyrocket for the next decade or so. This also meant that Conrail was able to last long enough for shippers to actually see what they're capable of, and make them go, oh, this is a much better way of shipping our goods across the country than these trucks. And yeah, Conrail was doing a very good job at shipping goods from A to B, way better than trucks, because like I said, with trucks, they can only carry so much in one trailer. You can add more trailers, but yeah, certain regulations in certain states aren't going to get you anywhere. Trains, on the other hand, they're different, because they're very powerful and they can carry a lot of cargo and have a lot of cars behind them. So there's really no limit to what they can carry. So this is a much better way of shipping goods across the country because there's no limit. Trains are fairly quick too, so yeah, but trucks are more direct. But trains, they're really good when it comes to long haul shipment and the amount of goods they can carry. And Conrail showed just that. Now, I think I speak for everyone here when I say that we really want to get to that Conrail split. And what actually happened, what was the story behind it, and what came of Conrail after that. So, I'm going to waste no time and get into just that. But first, we'll need to take this to the 1990s. During that decade, Conrail's profits were going through the roof faster than a ballistic missile from North Korea. Anyway, they decided to merge with another company, which was pretty logical at the time because railroads, they were morphing into one like really quick, with the two most recent ones happening on September 11th, 1996, when the Union Pacific committed the big suck on Southern Pacific.
Oh, that was a good suck.
And when the Burlington Northern and Santa Fe merged to become the Burlington Northern and Santa Fe Railroad Company, or BNSF for short, on New Year's Eve of 1996. Going back to Conrail, the company they were looking to merge with was CSX, short for the Chessie Seaboard Express Company, or something like that. I don't know. I just made that up. No one really knows what CSX stands for. But anyway, they were turning to that company to merge with them, and CSX was like, alright, let's do it. So they placed a bid on Conrail. But this, however, drew the attention of Norfolk Southern,
which, fearing that CSX would come to dominate rail traffic in the eastern United States, made a bit of its own, leading to a takeover battle between the two railroads. In other words, Conrail wanted to merge with CSX, CSX placed a bid on Conrail, Norfolk Southern was like, hey, nah, you're not doing that, so they kind of had a civil war over it.
He's my friend. So was I.
Okay, no, it definitely wasn't that kind of civil war, but the kind of civil war that basically had the two railroad companies trying to outbid one another in order to get Conrail onto themselves. After doing this for a good while, the two companies came to realize that it was getting pointless, it wasn't really getting them anywhere, so they decided to split up the company instead. Because, I mean, if you can't take a whole of it, you might as well take part of it, right? So, that's exactly what they did. It took them 2 years, but they managed to pull it off. Speaking of Civil War, let's talk about this movie for a second. Now, do you think Iron Man would have won against Captain America if he didn't hold back, or was he crushed from the start? I asked this question to a friend of mine, and he said Iron Man would have easily creamed on Captain America if he didn't hold back. But, what do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments. Going back to CSX and Norfolk Southern, the two railroads made an agreement to split up Conrail in 1997. I know what you're thinking. This is going to be easy. It's going to be an easy 50-50 split. CSX is going to get one side of Conrail, Norfolk Southern is going to get the other side. It's going to be an equal split, right? Wrong. You're dead wrong. This would not be a 50-50 split. What would happen is that Norfolk Southern would get 58% of Conrail's assets, including 6,000 miles of trackage, and CSX would get 42% of Conrail's assets, along with 3,600 miles of trackage. Well, no one was really bothered by this, neither the Norfolk Southern and CSX, because they were going to get Conrail anyway, so, you know, they just rolled with it. And this was approved by the Surface Transportation Board, which was the successor agency to the Interstate Commerce Commission, on August 22nd, 1998. And finally, on June 1st, 1999, CSX and Norfolk Southern fully split up Conrail, bringing the Big Blue Railroad's 23-year run to an end.
Yeah, it's kind of sad what came of Conrail in 1999, but all good things must have an end, and Conrail was no exception. But what happened to the locomotives after the split? Well, it's pretty dead simple.
Straight after the Conrail split, both NS and CSX had their Conrail units patched over with basically just a slab of paint over their original numbers and were renumbered. With Norfolk Southern, they had a white stripe over the numbers, some in black, and one unit, Norfolk Southern 6784, they just like completely renumbered it. No white or black stripe. Well, there was a black stripe below the number, but basically they kept the original blue and they just painted the number 6784 in white, which was very cool. I don't know why Norfolk Southern didn't do the same with their other Conrail units. And with CSX, they did the same thing, except they put a slab of blue paint over it and just painted yellow numbers on them, which looked very cool, so much better than how NS patched their Conrail units. Now, I get what they were going for. Blue wasn't in their color scheme, black and white was, because of the Norfolk Southern Horsehead scheme, which all their Conrail units would later receive, all but 8312 for some reason. But I'll get to that in a bit. But with CSX, yellow and blue they were in their color scheme, so they used that. But hey, they look a hell of a lot nicer if you ask me. Unlike Norfolk Southern, the yellow and blue was in CSX's color scheme, with the back then current Yellow Nose 2 paint scheme, which was a thing when CSX and NS split up Conrail in 1999, as stated before. The Yellow Nose 2 paint scheme had a yellow slab of paint on the front and the rear of the locomotive, with the blue cab and a grey long hood, and with a blue stripe running underneath the grey part of the long hood, which looked hella cool, and some even call this the greatest paint scheme that CSX has ever done. And I can agree with them there, because, man, that's a badass color scheme. Most of the ex-Conrails that were running on CSX's system would receive the Yellow Nose 2 paint scheme a couple years after the 1999 split. In 2002, CSX introduced a new paint scheme called the Yellow Nose 3. Both the nose and the rear of the long hood would keep the yellow paint. However, from the cab to the long hood, was all painted blue, whereas the Yellow 2, as stated before, only had the blue cab and the grey long hood. But during then, when it was first introduced, it was all blue. So after 2002, a good handful of Conrails that weren't repainted yet were repainted into the Yellow 3 scheme.
And the two railroads proceeded to repaint all of their Conrail locomotives into their respective colour schemes until the year 2014 rolled around, which Norfolk Southern A312, which somehow still retained its Conrail blue, was retired in 2014, which was kind of sad. And I think they most likely scrapped it too, which really sucks. So yeah, that's basically it. That's basically it for Conrail. Now, is Conrail really gone? Yes and no. Okay, I know I dropped the brain chill on you all, so let me explain.
As we all know by now, both NS and CSX split up Conrail on June 1st of 1999 and would patch and repaint all of their locomotives for the next 15 years, leaving no Conrail units left. Well, not exactly. In 2012, Norfolk Southern had their 30th anniversary, and to celebrate it, they decided to paint 20 new locomotives in the colour schemes of predecessor railroads, with Conrail being one of them. ES44AC number 8098 was given the iconic Conrail can opener scheme, which looks very cool, by the way. And 11 years later, in 2023, CSX had CSX 1976, an ES44AH locomotive that was repainted into the Conrail quality paint scheme. Well, the long version was, that is. That's right. The cab still had the CSX blue, but the long hood had the Conrail quality blue. I really like what they were trying to do here. They were like trying to blend in present paint schemes to past paint schemes. Like, in other words, CSX trying to display what they are now with the cab, and the long hood displaying what it was then. Or what the railroad was before both CSX and NS sliced it in half. Well, not clean through the half, because they only got 42% Conrail's assets, as I said before. But still, they did a really good job with the locomotive. Another thing that helped to preserve Conrail's legacy was a company that was established on the same day that Conrail got split up, which was the Conrail Shared Assets Operation, which is a contract local carrier and switching company for CSX and Norfolk Southern, which are both the companies that own the Conrail Shared Assets Operations. The company runs trains in the northern and southern areas of New Jersey, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Detroit, Michigan. During the 2000s, it wasn't uncommon to see a pair of ex-Conrail locomotives on a freight train, but as the 2000s turned into the 2010s, that number had quickly dropped to a zero, especially after 2014 when the last Conrail unit was retired. But it was a nice sight while it lasted, and they still run trains to this very day. Just don't count on seeing any Conrail blue locomotives anytime soon.
And that's it. That's the story of Conrail. A legacy to be remarked and one of the greatest railroads in American history. So it's really cool to see that Norfolk Southern and CSX, the two railroads that split up Conrail in the first place, still continue their legacy because they mostly still operate like all the lines that they've got. Or I think, well, they still would. I'm not sure all. I'm assuming so, but a good chunk they're still in operation. Speaking of operation, also a good chunk of their ex-Conrail locomotives are still running, just not in their Conrail blue. And speaking of Conrail blue, both of their heritage units, they look hella cool in their Conrail blue livery, whether it be the can opener scheme or the Conrail quality scheme. Now, which scheme do I think is better? Well, I like the Conrail can opener. It looks really cool. But the Conrail quality livery, that is different. Especially because they mesh the can opener and they put like the big letter Q, capital Q, on the Conrail can opener livery. I think if I were to like pick a favorite scheme, I'm just gonna go with the Conrail quality scheme. That crap, it's different. Let me tell you. What else is there? Oh yeah. I'm not sure if I really have much to say about Conrail, like with the history and all things considered. Do I want Conrail back? No, not really. I don't want it back. Okay, I know that sounds offensive to some people, considering how I'm technically a Conrail addict, meaning that I love Conrail, I love seeing Conrail. And you're probably wondering, why would you say that? Well, I mean, let's think about it. If Conrail was still a thing today, it wouldn't have made much difference at all. It was created to drag the struggling rail industry back into the spotlight, which they did a really good job at, much better than Penn Central, because they screwed up bad with that. But with Conrail, they did it clean. Mwah, chef's kiss to them. But if there was still a thing nowadays, it wouldn't have really made much difference, because as of now, the rail industry is much more stable than what it once was. For America, that is. I don't know if over here in Australia we really experienced a mass shortage in rail profit. We probably did at some point, but I think we still managed to bounce back from it. But America's story is especially interesting because there are a lot of good things that came out of it, Conrail being one of them. And what else is there? Yeah, they fulfilled their purpose, technically, so they wouldn't have really made much of a difference today. Even if they didn't merge with other companies, I mean, even if they didn't get split up, they probably would have still merged anyway. Look at Canadian Pacific, for example. They were looking to merge in the mid-2010s. They first went to CSX, but they declined it. Went to Norfolk Southern, also declined. Went to the Kansas City Southern, they approved. Took them 2 years, the Canadian Pacific, they went to Kansas City Southern in 2021, they just wanted to merge. Kansas City accepted the merge, and it took them 2 years to get it approved. But in 2023, they did just that. The year after, they sent a Canadian Pacific locomotive, number 2816, from Alberta, somewhere in Alberta, I forget, but basically it went across Canada, the United States, and Mexico. Things got a little chaotic in Mexico though, but it made history because it was the first steam locomotive to ever make it through the 3 countries. So I guess you could call that an international trip. But anyway, that's a story for another day. If Conrail was still a thing today, it wouldn't have made much of a difference. And they probably would have merged with someone else anyway, even if they didn't get split up. They probably would have looked for someone to merge with, eventually they did, and they merged. But, yeah, they got split up. They got split up. And, in a way, in a twisted way, I'm kind of glad they did, because they fulfilled their purpose up until that point. They kind of lived it to the fullest while they still could, so it's only fair that came to an end. I know it's a pretty rude way of looking at it, but you know, Conrail, it did its thing, it did what it was supposed to do, so now it's time to put it to rest. It's kind of sad, I know, but they lived their life to the fullest in the time they had. Kind of like us humans. Because I don't know, no one knows when they're gonna die. For example, I don't know when I'm gonna die. Could be the next day, next week, next month, next year, even the next decade. Oh, you thought you were safe? No, you could die the next day, week, month, or even the next decade. I don't know. That's why we have to live our lives to the fullest of the time we have. Because you never know when something or someone can come along and take that away from you. So, if you have a passion that you really want to do, or a dream job that you really want to do, or something you've been wanting to do for bloody ages, go bloody do it, mate. Because you never know and you'll never get the chance to do it again. I know it's a depressing way to look at it, but in all seriousness, Conrail had a purpose, fulfilled its purpose, so it's only fair it had an end to it. Let's just be real here, guys, nothing lasts forever. Everything has an expiry date. Conrail's expiry date so happened to be on June 1st, 1999. Could have been any other day. Could have been earlier, later, but it had to be that day. Why? That's just destiny for you. Destiny chooses. You choose your path. Destiny chooses your fate. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I have had a lot of fun making it, and I hope you guys have had a lot of fun watching it as well. If you enjoyed, make sure you smash a like, comment below what you want to see next, subscribe, hit the bell on all notifications to never miss future videos like this again. And I've got Story Crops in episode 3 that's gonna come out in like a month or 2, but it's gonna take a while to do, but it's gonna be really epic when it comes out. So if I were you, I'd hit that notification bell so that you do not miss it, because it's gonna be epic. Anyway, that's all I've got to say. So until next time, peace out, ladies and gents.